Hello and welcome. It's 7 p.m. India time or 13:30 GMT, and it's 9:30 in the evening in Hong Kong, where a record number of people have voted in the District Council election. As per official data, more than 2.6 million voters had cast their ballots by 7:30 p.m. local time. This is a big jump from the 1.47 million votes polled in the previous election held 4 years ago. The council election is the first to be held in the special administrative region since protests broke out in June this year. It's being viewed as a barometer of support for Chief Executive Carrie Lam. It's been speculated that the anger against government is a factor behind the record voter turnout. Brutal attacks on candidates in the lead-up to the polls has further angered voters. It's the first time that all 452 seats in the 18 district councils are being contested for. 1,104 candidates contested the election. However, a glaring absence from the ballot paper is student leader Joshua Wong. Joshua was barred from contesting after he was accused of violating Hong Kong's basic law. Polling sessions open at 7:30 in the morning and will close at about 10:30 p.m. local time. Now, Hong Kong's first chief executive, Tung Chee-hwa, cast his vote in the morning. He praised the Hong Kong voters for saying no to violence. He hoped that the district council election would be the first step towards restoration of peace in Hong Kong.
區議會係社會民生事務嘅一個好緊要嘅平台，係人民解決自己問題嘅一個平台。喺今時今日嘅時候，我哋最緊要嘅呢，要選出呢真心為我哋香港嚟做事嘅地區嘅代表。希望選舉之後，社會各方面能夠共同努力，真正使到香港嘅社會回復平靜，重新出發。
And Beyond World One's Grace Lee now joins us live from Hong Kong. Grace, good evening and thank you for joining us again on Beyond World One. We are less than 1 hour away from the polls to close in Hong Kong. Are people still lining up to cast the ballot, and what's the mood like where you are?
Well, I'm here in Sheung Wan, one of the popular neighborhoods here in Hong Kong, and of course the lines were around the blocks throughout the day, but as you can see behind me, we have an hour left for people to cast their votes, and it seems like the last few people are heading in to cast their votes. Now, the mood in Hong Kong has been largely calm throughout the day here, especially because Hong Kong's government has said that if there were to be any unrest or violence from the protesters' side, they would shut down the elections immediately and push it back all the way to December 1st. And of course, that's not what protesters want to see, because this election is widely seen as kind of a win for the protesters because of that huge turnout that we've been seeing throughout the day. They're expecting that the pro-democratic side will have a lot more push in this election this time around. But being here on the ground and speaking to people, it seems like it is a very mixed bag. We do have, of course, people who are sympathetic towards the protesters' cause, but there's also a lot of people who are voting for pro-Beijing or pro-establishment because they're sick of the protests and they want some order to return to Hong Kong. So it is kind of a mixed bag. There's still an hour left for Hong Kongers to come out and vote, but the time is ticking, and it seems like largely there hasn't been any unrest so far.
Now, Grace, some people are describing or viewing this election as an unofficial referendum on Carrie Lam, her administration, and the Chinese government's rule over Hong Kong. What's the sense you are picking up from the ground?
Yes, absolutely. And on the flip side, it's also kind of being seen as a way for protesters to gauge how much support they still have here in Hong Kong. You know, it's been a very violent past couple of months. We've seen a lot of clashes between protesters and police, and we've seen splits within the protesters' camps. And a lot of more moderate protesters worried that they might be losing out on support from Hong Kongers and also the international community as we see more and more kind of violent clashes. So the results of this election will be a large indicator as to whether or not the protest movement here is running out of steam.
Right. And Grace, let's talk about the elections and the protests on the other hand. Now, what kind of impact did the protests have on the voting and the polling in Hong Kong today? And what kind of impact will the results have on the protests going forward?
Well, as we're standing here today, there are still dozens of people left inside of Polytechnic University where we saw some massive clashes earlier this week. And of course, that is still on the minds of a lot of people who are here to cast their votes. They feel like they're trying to get their voices heard for those protesters who have been left behind. That's had a huge influence on the number of people we've been seeing, especially from many of the older generation who say they're trying to step up and help out the way that they can for these younger protesters that are on the front line. So that's definitely been a big influence on how people have been voting. But of course, like I said, there is a lot of kind of anger and resentment towards the protest movement as well from pro-Beijing or pro-establishment camps who say that, you know, it's been months and they're tired of the protests and they want some order to be restored in Hong Kong.
And talking about the turnout, Grace, now last I checked, 2.6 million voters had cast a ballot. This was significantly higher than 1.47 million in indeed. And Grace, very quickly, one last question. It's been 6 months and counting since the protest began in June this year. What kind of impact might this have on the protest itself going forward? As you said, some students are still holed up in the Polytechnic University. Will the protests gather momentum going forward after the results are known?
Well, that's yet to be seen, especially because we don't know what the results of the election is. We're assuming that if the kind of majority is pro-Beijing, there will be some kind of outcry from the protesters. But of course, if we see a win from the pro-democratic side, it will surely signal to protesters that perhaps they're gaining more momentum. And now, as for the district councillors, they don't really have a huge pull in the government. They're not able to veto legislation, nor are they able to make laws. But what they are able to do is have a small say in who becomes Hong Kong's next leader. They get about 10% of the space reserved for people who decide who becomes the next leader of Hong Kong. So that's really what protesters are looking for. They're looking for small changes, tangible changes that they can point to as we enter 6 months of unrest here in Hong Kong.
All right, Grace Lee in Hong Kong, thank you for that update and information. Appreciate it.